I never liked corporate parties. That kind of event just never sat right with me. Maybe it's the canned laughter or the way people try too hard to act like a family when most of them can't wait to complain about each other at happy hour. It's all surface-level stuff, all optics. Still, I went because Allison asked me to. She'd been planning this Christmas party at her firm for weeks, talking about the Secret Santa draw, the quiz games, the photo booth backdrop she helped design with Ray from marketing. That name kept coming up more than I liked, but I didn't think too much of it at the time. Ray this, Ray that. Ray's hilarious, she'd say. Ray helped me with the playlist. I figured he was just one of those loud, charming types who people naturally gravitate toward. Every office has one. That Friday night, I put on my best button-up blue with small white dots, the one Allison said brought out my eyes, and drove across town to the hotel where the party was being held. I'd worked a long week and almost bailed, but I pushed through. For her. The place was decked out with twinkling lights and garlands that framed every doorway. There was even fake snow lining the red carpet entrance. It felt like a Hollywood Christmas movie. As soon as I walked in, I spotted Allison across the room holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by a group of people laughing at something someone had just said. She looked stunning, a red velvet dress, silver earrings, hair up in the way she only does for events. For a second, I forgot why I hated these things. She waved when she saw me, then turned back to the group. I didn't go over immediately. I needed a minute. These people knew each other. They had their office jokes, their shared stress, their own rhythm. I was an outsider even more so than usual. I made my way to the drink station and poured myself a ginger ale. Some guy next to me was explaining his theory about Google ad metrics to another guy who looked like he wanted to fall into his glass. I nodded politely when someone bumped into me, apologized, then got lost in the crowd. I must have wandered the outer edge of that party 3 times before I decided to look for Allison. She'd vanished from the group I first saw her with, and I figured maybe she'd gone to grab something or was helping one of the coordinators. She loved being involved. That's her thing. Always the first to say, I'll help, even if it means staying late or picking up the slack for someone else. One of the things I used to admire about her. I was halfway past the stage area when I noticed the side door was slightly ajar. A sliver of light cut across the darker hallway. I don't know why I went through it, curiosity, instinct, maybe just looking for a quiet space where I didn't have to nod and pretend to enjoy myself. The room behind the door was dim, lined with props, spare chairs, and a metal rack holding extra coats. I thought it was empty until I heard voices. Low, quiet. Too quiet for coworkers chatting about party logistics. That's when I saw them. Allison and Ray. They didn't notice me right away. She was facing him, her hand holding the bottom of his tie like she was fixing it, but it didn't feel like fixing. It felt, mate. Her head tilted slightly. He said something I couldn't hear, and she laughed, soft, private. The kind of laugh that comes out naturally when you feel safe with someone. Comfortable. Maybe a little flirtatious. My stomach clenched. Ray was taller than me. He had that clean, polished look, like the kind of guy who always smells like expensive cologne and has great teeth without trying. I'd only met him once before, briefly, at a fundraiser Allison helped organize. He made some joke I didn't get, and Allison laughed a little too loud. I remember thinking, well, he's harmless. Just the office clown. But in that moment, with the two of them in that backstage corner, they didn't look like coworkers. They looked like they were in a bubble, one I wasn't supposed to see. Then Allison noticed me. Her whole body stiffened for half a second before she flashed a smile, too wide, too fast. Oh. You're already here, she said, letting go of his tie as though it had burned her fingers. We were just rehearsing. Yeah, for the holiday quiz. It's kind of a skit thing. Super goofy. Ray looked over his shoulder and gave me a nod that felt more like a nod of acknowledgement than greeting. Not embarrassed. Not even surprised. Before I could say a word, Allison walked toward me, linked her arm with mine, and steered me out of the room. You're gonna love the game we came up with, she said brightly. Ray's such a ham, he's got this whole bad Santa thing going. It's ridiculous. I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know what to say. What do you say when your gut tells you something's off, but everything around you looks perfectly staged? Back in the main hall, everything resumed its normal pace, music, laughter, the smell of roasted appetizers drifting from a tray carried by a waiter in a red vest. Allison leaned over to kiss my cheek and handed me a drink I didn't ask for. You okay? She asked, searching my face. Yeah, I said. Just a little tired. She smiled again, this time more softly, and squeezed my hand. Then someone called her name and she turned to wave. In a blink, she was swept back into the party like nothing had happened. But something had happened. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. People tried to chat with me and I played along. Smiled. Nodded. I laughed at a joke about a department head dressed as Rudolph. Someone spilled cider near my shoes and apologized profusely. I barely noticed. All I kept thinking about was that moment backstage. The look on her face before she saw me. The way she pulled her hand back. The quick explanation that didn't need to be that quick. And Ray, how comfortable he looked. Like this wasn't new. I didn't accuse her of anything. I didn't ask questions or press her when we got in the car later that night. She talked about how well the quiz went, how Denise from accounting guessed the wrong Secret Santa, how the raffle prize ended up being a Bluetooth speaker. She laughed as she told me all of it. And I listened. Or at least, I pretended to. But deep down, something had cracked. Not shattered, just a clean, silent fracture. One that ran deep. Because in that moment backstage, I wasn't just her husband, I was a spectator. Watching something unfold in real time, something that I clearly wasn't part of. And no matter how much I smiled or played along, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't in the script. The morning after the party, Allison was humming in the kitchen while flipping pancakes. That was her go-to-everything's normal act. But now, instead of making me feel at home, it made me feel like a guest. Like I was being served a distraction. She wore a sweatshirt I didn't recognize, navy blue with a logo I'd never seen. It wasn't mine and it wasn't from any of our trips. I should have asked about it. I didn't. Instead, I sat at the counter with coffee I couldn't taste, wondering if she knew how suspicious that whole night felt to me. She never brought up the skit again. Neither did I. But that's when it started. The reevaluating. You know how, after something cracks, you go back and test every surface? Tap the walls. Push on the floorboards. Check for rot under the paint. That's what I started doing, but with her life. I started poking at the little things. And the more I looked, the more I saw what I'd missed. She'd been coming home later than usual for the past couple of months, blaming it on some campaign deadline that always seemed to be extended. I used to take her at her word. Why wouldn't I? She's smart, driven, respected in her office. But now I was wondering, was it overtime or was it Ray? Then there were the nights she brought her laptop into the living room. She'd sit on the couch while I cooked dinner or scrolled my phone and she'd click away with this focused expression. I'd glance over sometimes and ask what she was working on. Just work, she'd say, minimizing whatever window was open before I could see. Once or twice I joked, what, classified, and she'd smile and say, you wouldn't understand, just spreadsheets and chaos. At the time, I believed her. Yeah? Now I remembered how fast that smile would disappear once I turned back to my phone. And her phone, God, that phone. Always face down. Always on silent. One night, I noticed her typing rapidly with this little smile, the kind that happens when you're entertained. I leaned in and asked who she was texting. Oh, just Denise, she said without looking up. Then she locked the screen. Allison never used to change her passcode. For years it had been our anniversary. But sometime this fall, I noticed I couldn't unlock it anymore. I mentioned it once and she said, yeah, IT at work said we should rotate them for security. You should do the same. But my gut didn't feel secure. It felt locked out. She started taking longer routes home, too. I noticed because I could track her drive on the app we used to share for traffic alerts. One day, she told me she was working from a satellite office to be closer to a client. I checked, there was no satellite office. Just a co-working space on the other side of town. The same co-working space Ray posted about once on Instagram, showing off some ridiculous croissant and calling it his creative corner. And yet I said nothing. Because at the time, all I had were questions and a bad feeling. And I'd rather feel stupid than accusatory. But when I started replaying everything after the party, it all lined up like clues in a mystery novel I didn't know I was in. Even the way she dressed had shifted. She used to come home in flats and cardigans. Lately, she'd changed clothes at the office before coming home, saying the office air was dusty and she didn't want to track anything in. Track what in, Allison? The scent of someone else? There was one night, about 2 weeks before the party, when she came home visibly flushed. Her cheeks red, her eyes glassy. She said the office HVAC had been broken all day. I brought her a glass of water and offered to make her tea. She said no, she was just going to shower. When she walked away, I remember catching a faint scent of something unfamiliar, like the faint trace of men's cologne. Not mine. Not subtle. Sharp. Something citrusy with a warm, woody base. It lingered in the air like guilt with a price tag. Even then, I didn't push. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. That maybe I was the problem, too sensitive, too suspicious, maybe too boring. That I was losing her not because of someone else, but because of who I wasn't. But then there was Ray. He was always around in her stories. Ray said this. Ray made her laugh. Ray knew the best place for sushi. Ray came up with the idea for the campaign. Ray lent her his favorite book and she said it reminded her of me. That last one should have been flattering, but it just felt like something people say to cross a line without admitting they've crossed it. He wasn't just a name in a story anymore, he was a theme. A recurring character with too many lines. One time I asked if she and Ray were close. Not accusing, just curious. She laughed and said, God no. Ray's just a work clown. He's married anyway, well, technically separated. But that's a whole mess. Technically separated. I should have listened closer. I should have asked why she knew that. But instead I nodded. Because when someone you love offers you a lie in gift wrap, you take it. It's easier than facing the fact that maybe, just maybe, you're being written out of your own story. And that's exactly how it started to feel. Like I was being phased out. Slowly, strategically. She used to ask about my projects, my deadlines, my coworkers. Now she just nodded through my updates, eyes drifting toward her phone. We stopped watching shows together. She said she was too tired. I found myself finishing entire episodes of our favorite series alone. The we in our marriage was becoming an I with a roommate. I even remember the last real conversation we had before the party. It was about what to bring to her potluck lunch. She suggested I make that pasta salad everyone liked. I asked if she thought her coworkers would mind if I made something different this time. She paused just for a second, then said, maybe stick with what you're good at. What I'm good at. That line landed heavier than it should have. Not because of what it was, but because of what it implied. Don't try. Don't change. Stay predictable. Stay out of the way. I wasn't being included, I was being managed. By the time I got to the end of the string of memories, I felt like I was watching my life from the outside. Like I was standing in a house where all the pictures were turned face down. Where every drawer had a secret. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like her partner. I felt like a placeholder. A background character. Maybe I was never meant to see what was backstage. Maybe she thought she'd trained me well enough to never look behind the curtain. But once you see the script, once you notice the patterns, it's impossible to unsee. I didn't have proof yet. But I had something else, something worse. I had clarity. Proof didn't come when I wanted it. It came when I stopped looking for it. It was a Wednesday. I remember because it was trash day and I was annoyed about having to drag the bins down the driveway in the rain. I was running late for work and barely had time to grab my travel mug before heading out. As I slid into the driver's seat of my car, something dug into my leg. Not hard, but sharp enough to catch my attention. I reached under the seat, expecting to find a pen or maybe that rogue house key I'd lost months ago. But it wasn't either of those. It was an earring. One of those cheap costume jewelry pieces with a plastic gemstone and a flimsy clasp. Gold-painted metal that had already started to tarnish. Definitely not Allison's. She hated fake jewelry. She once told me it made her ears itch just looking at it. I turned it over in my hand, trying to reason through it. Maybe it belonged to someone who borrowed the car? But who? No one else used my car. Not friends. Not coworkers. Not family. Just me and Allison, maybe once or twice when hers was at the shop. But that was weeks ago. I didn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. I just placed the earring gently in the center console. Like it was evidence I wasn't ready to submit. I went through the day like a ghost. Meetings came and went. Deadlines passed. People talked and I nodded. But my mind was stuck in the space under my car seat. That night, when Allison came home, I watched her a little differently. Not with suspicion exactly, but with quiet calculation. She greeted me like usual, kicked off her shoes, asked if I'd eaten. She poured herself a glass of wine and curled up on the couch with her laptop. Big week coming, she said. Presentations, client calls. It's non-stop. Yeah, I asked, not moving from the kitchen. She nodded without looking up. Anything I can help with? She smiled. Just keep the coffee coming. And that was it. No mention of the earring. No accidental confession. Of course not. That's not how these things happen. People don't crack on cue. I waited 3 days before I made my move. I needed something more. Something undeniable. That Saturday, Allison went to a spa retreat with a few women from her office, or so she claimed. She left early in the morning with her gym bag slung over one shoulder and a yoga mat she hadn't used in a year tucked under the other. As soon as I watched her car disappear down the block, I sat down at her laptop. It was a risk, but calculated. I knew the Wi-Fi needed a reset. I'd pretended to mess with the router earlier in the week just to float the idea. You know, I might need to reconfigure some things on your work laptop, I had said casually. Sometimes the VPN settings block our new modem. She hadn't questioned it. Just handed over her password like it was nothing. But that was then. Now the password had changed. I tried the old one first, our anniversary. Then the name of our cat. Then her her childhood street address. No dice. Then, almost on instinct, I typed Clark 2023. Access granted. I stared at the home screen, my heart pounding louder than the rain outside. The desktop was clean. Suspiciously clean. Only one folder sat in the corner. Work docs. I opened it. Just spreadsheets, logos, campaign drafts. I almost gave up. Until I opened the Photos app. That's when everything shattered. Buried in a sea of *TS PDFs of ad briefs, charts, social media analytics was a video file. No title. No context. Just a timestamp. December 15th, 11:48 p.m. The night of the corporate party. I clicked it. It was grainy at first. A phone camera tilted up slightly. The angle looked accidental. Like someone had bumped the record button and didn't realize. There was a conference room in the background, half decorated with garland and leftover catering trays on the table. Holiday music played faintly in the distance. And then they appeared. Allison and Ray. She was seated on the edge of a table. He stood between her knees. They kissed. Not a quick, awkward peck. This was the kind of kiss people lean into. Slow. Familiar. Confident. Behind them, through the half-open door, you could see the glow of the main party hall. I squinted, and my stomach dropped. My jacket was hanging over a chair in the background. I was in that room, feet away. They had done this while I was there. I slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the house. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't jealousy or insecurity. This was real. This was betrayal filmed. I didn't rage. I didn't break anything. I just sat there, in the dark with my heart hollowed out. When Allison came home the next evening, she looked relaxed. The retreat was amazing, she said, tossing her bag near the door. They had these eucalyptus steam rooms. Felt like I was reborn. She asked if I wanted to watch something on Netflix. I said I was tired. I went to bed early, but I didn't sleep. I kept seeing that video, that kiss. Her hand on the back of his neck, his fingers on her thigh, the angle of her head, like she'd done this 100 times before. They weren't worried about getting caught. They weren't worried about me. I meant so little in that moment, they didn't even bother to lock the door. And that's what cut the deepest. Not the kiss itself, but the ease of it, the casualness. Like I was already gone. Like I was just a detail they hadn't filed away yet. I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or demand an explanation. I just sat with it. Because when the truth finally arrives, when it walks right into your house and looks you in the eye, it doesn't bring rage. Not at first. It brings silence. The kind that settles into your bones. The kind that replaces your heartbeat with a countdown. Something inside me had shifted forever. And now it was only a matter of time. I didn't pack with anger. That's what surprised me most. There was no screaming, no smashed glasses, no dramatic goodbye. I just moved. Deliberate. Quiet. Like someone evacuating before a storm they knew was coming. I waited until she left for work Monday morning. She kissed my cheek, told me to have a good day, and left the house in the same red trench coat she'd worn the night we went out for our anniversary. Back then, I thought it was for me. Now I wasn't so sure. As soon as I heard the garage door shut, I went upstairs. Pulled a duffel bag from the closet. I didn't even think about what to take, just grabbed the essentials. Socks, t-shirts, jeans. A hoodie she'd bought me from Cannon Beach 3 years ago. I hesitated on that one. It had her in it, her memory, her warmth. I shoved it in anyway. By noon, I was gone. I drove 2 hours west to a place we used to visit in the early days back when we were still newly married and everything felt like it had a soundtrack. It was a coastal campground tucked behind tall pine trees where the ocean always sounded closer than it really was. We'd gone there after our first real fight, camped in a borrowed tent, and promised each other we'd always work through things. Funny. Now I was going there to get away from her. I didn't bring a tent this time. Just parked at the edge of the trailhead and sat in my car. Phone off. No music. No messages. Just silence. The kind that's not peaceful, just necessary. I stared out at the gray line of sky meeting sea. There was no one else around, just a few crows and the occasional distant bark of a dog. It was cold. I didn't care. The wind felt like it was sanding something raw off of me. And I needed that. Because the words in my head, love, trust, together, felt like lies someone else had written. Or maybe I had. Maybe I was the author of my own illusion and now I was watching it burn page by page. I thought about the video again. Not just what I saw, but what it confirmed. How it stitched every doubt together into one undeniable truth. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overthinking. I was just late to the truth. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the way she leaned into him. The way she smiled, small and knowing, like they shared something sacred. The kind of smile she used to save for me. Used to. I stayed in the car overnight, wrapped in an old blanket and surrounded by the faint scent of pine needles and wet leather. I didn't sleep much. My thoughts were too loud. Too fast. Memories rose and fell like waves. Our wedding day. The first time she met my parents. The night we danced barefoot in the kitchen after the power went out. All of it now felt like a foreign language. Familiar but unreadable. I could still see her face. Still hear her laugh. And that was the cruelest part, how betrayal doesn't erase love. It just poisons it. Makes it sharp where it used to be soft. The second day I walked down to the beach. Just me, the crashing surf, and a sky that looked ready to crack open. I picked up a flat stone and skipped it into the tide. It sank immediately. I laughed. It felt good to laugh at something that didn't hurt. Around dusk, I turned my phone back on. 17 missed calls. 10 texts. All from Allison. The most recent one just said, "Please, let's talk." I didn't read the rest. I turned the phone off again. By the time I drove home the next evening, something inside me had hardened, not into bitterness, but into clarity. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for an apology. I was looking for air. When I stepped through the front door, the house smelled like citrus candles and fabric softener. Like her. Like us. The familiarity hit me harder than I expected. I stood in the entryway, keys still in my hand, staring at the coat rack like it might say something useful. She was asleep on the couch, phone in hand. She looked small. Not innocent, just human. Tired. Vulnerable in a way that might have broken my heart once. I walked past her and into the bedroom. The bed was made. Her side untouched. A throw blanket folded at the foot, the way she always did when she was nervous or wanted things to look more put together. I didn't unpack. I didn't speak. I lay down and stared at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the hallway clock and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was the sound of things continuing, despite everything. In the morning, she was gone. No note. No message. But the silence still hung heavy like a conversation waiting to be had. I wasn't ready to have it. Not yet. Because I didn't leave to punish her. I left because I needed to remember who I was when I wasn't being betrayed. And the truth was, I liked that guy better. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cold mug of coffee like it might offer answers. The house was too quiet, and yet every creak felt amplified, like the walls were watching. Judging. I thought about turning on music just to drown it all out, but even silence felt more honest than whatever playlist she used to put on while cooking. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep circling the wound, hoping it would stop bleeding on its own. I needed the truth. All of it. So I called Ben. Ben and I had known each other since high school, nerds who used to jailbreak phones and reroute school Wi-Fi for fun. Now he worked in IT for a local firm and occasionally did favors for friends, the kind that came with a handshake and no questions asked. When I told him what was going on, he didn't ask why. He just said, "Bring the phone." I met him that afternoon in his garage, where he kept a folding table set up with tools, cables, and 2 laptops that looked like they belonged in a spy movie. He plugged Allison's phone into a black data extractor and typed like a man who'd done this 1,000 times. Which he probably had. "It'll take a while," he said. "Deleted files take longer. You want everything?" "Yeah," I said, my voice lower than I expected. "Everything." While we waited, he handed me a beer and didn't say much. That's the kind of friend Ben is. No pity. No pep talk. Just quiet understanding. An hour later, he spun the laptop around. "It's all there," he said. "Photos, texts, even deleted chats. I exported it to a folder for you." I opened it slowly, like I was lifting the lid on something radioactive. At first, it was what I expected, texts to Ray, a few blurry selfies, screensh asterisk TS of memes they'd shared back and forth. Stupid stuff. Inside jokes. Office gossip. Then I found the message that made my throat close. "Ray, when are we escaping again?" Sponsors probably at Home Depot picking out light bulbs. Allison, LOL stop. Don't be mean. Ray, tell me I'm wrong. Allison, you're not. He's sweet. Just simple. Just simple. I read that line 10 times. Each time it stung worse than the last. This wasn't passion. This wasn't two people caught up in something bigger than themselves. This was a game. A slow, smug, inside joke kind of cruelty that comes from knowing you can get away with it. They called me the sponsor. The quiet sapper. Like I was funding their private theater while unknowingly playing the fool in the front row. There were messages about hotels. One in particular was timestamped a week before the party. She told me she had a client dinner. In reality, they had a reservation under a fake name. She even sent Ray a picture of the hotel bed, captioned best room yet. It didn't stop there. Screensh *TS of emails. Gift receipts. A spa appointment booked under his last name. Photos of the two of them at a food truck downtown, smiling like teenagers. I even found a note in her phone. Remember to say we canceled SantaCon tickets, blame Denise. She had scripted my ignorance. I closed the folder and sat back, the metal chair suddenly too cold. Ben said nothing. Just slid another beer across the table. I didn't drink it. I thanked him, left the phone behind, and walked out into the dusk with a weight in my chest I didn't know how to carry. When I got home, the lights were off. Her car wasn't in the driveway. I didn't expect her to be home, but I still checked. Some part of me still hoped to find her curled up on the couch with an apology on her lips. But there was no apology. Just a woman who'd lived another life under my nose and didn't think I was sharp enough to notice. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just opened a new document on my computer, copied every message, every photo, every timestamp, and dropped them into a secure drive. A digital graveyard of what I thought was a life we built. Then I opened a second document and typed out 3 words. File for divorce. It didn't even feel dramatic. It felt necessary. Because this wasn't about one night or one man. This was about contempt. This was about a partner who saw me not as someone to love, but someone to outsmart. And when that kind of rot sets in, it doesn't heal, it spreads. She came home just after midnight. I heard the garage door open, heard her footsteps on the stairs. I stayed in the bedroom, lights off, door cracked. She didn't come in. I think she knew. Or maybe she was just too tired to lie again. I waited until I heard the guest room door shut. Then I opened her phone one last time. No lock. No password. She changed it back. Maybe a guilty conscience. Maybe laziness. Either way, it didn't matter. The damage was already done. The next morning, I placed a small cardboard box on the dining table. Inside were her things, nothing big. Just symbols. A framed photo from our honeymoon. The concert tickets I found in her drawer. The cheap earring from under my car seat. On top, I placed a note, you have 2 days to pick this up. After that, it's going to a shelter. No anger. No threats. Just a deadline. I didn't wait for her reaction. I left. Got in my car. Drove 2 hours in the opposite direction of the coast this time. I stayed in a rented room above a bookstore in a town I hadn't visited in years. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night.